The SEC auditor walked into our lobby at exactly 9 a.m., asking for me by name. Problem was, I'd quit 3 days earlier, and nobody had bothered to tell the federal government. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up. I'm Michael Richardson, 49 years old, and I just watched my career at Summit Financial Advisors go up in flames because I had the audacity to pursue an Executive MBA while working as their Chief Compliance Officer. 20 years in compliance, 8 years in the Navy before that, and they fired me for cultural misalignment. What they really meant was I wouldn't play their nepotism games. It all started 3 weeks earlier when I sat through my third executive meeting watching Dylan Sullivan, a 29-year-old with a Wharton MBA and 3 years at McKinsey, repeat my compliance roadmap like he'd invented it during his morning protein shake. I'd written that roadmap during a 14-hour prep marathon, while also cramming for my corporate finance final that same night. But there he was, soaking up applause from his Aunt Patricia and the rest of the leadership team, while I sat there taking notes like some invisible intern. No thanks, Mike. No great analysis. Just smug nods from executives who thought regulatory compliance was more of a suggestion than a legal requirement. After 2 decades in this business, I'd learned to survive in the fluorescent wasteland of being essential but overlooked. If you've ever been the guy explaining federal banking regulations to a VP who responds with, "Can we just skip that slide? It's killing the energy," then you know exactly what I'm talking about. I was the guy with the backbone to say that's illegal while everyone else worried about social media engagement and hiring their relatives. So I stopped trying to impress them and started building my exit strategy. 3 nights a week, I dragged my laptop to a corner booth at Panera, ordered their driest turkey sandwich, and chipped away at my Executive MBA at Northwestern Kellogg. I wasn't advertising it. I just wanted options. The office had become a parade of incompetence, where success was measured by who laughed hardest at Patricia Sullivan's corporate buzzwords, or complimented Madison Sullivan's latest innovation initiative. Madison, Patricia's 25-year-old niece with a Stanford MBA, had been appointed head of culture and innovation, which was code for young person with influence and zero understanding of what a chief compliance officer actually does. She started showing up to meetings in designer blazers, asking questions like, "What's our emotional alignment with regulatory frameworks?" Meanwhile, I'm trying to prevent us from accidentally violating 3 sections of the Investment Advisors Act. She didn't like me, I didn't play her games, I didn't get excited when she suggested putting motivational quotes in our compliance manual. The woman once said, "Let's make compliance feel more intuitive," as if the SEC gives participation trophies for good vibes. I tolerated it, kept my head down. I knew they didn't understand what I did, not really, but they liked that I was quiet, reliable, predictable. I answered emails at midnight, took calls when they were too scared to talk to auditors, and rewrote filings they'd screwed up, trying to make them sound more dynamic. The truth is, I was the legal duct tape holding together a yacht made of glitter and wishful thinking. They thought I'd never leave. That was their biggest mistake. It happened at the Q3 company celebration, some overpriced event at a downtown Chicago hotel. We were in this courtyard setup, celebrating quarterly numbers that nobody could really explain. The theme was innovation through collaboration, which basically meant overpriced appetizers and forced networking while a DJ played sanitized classic rock. I was standing off to the side with a club soda because I had an accounting final later that night when Madison found me. She floated over in her yellow power suit, wearing that tight smile she saved for people who drove used cars. "Oh, Mike," she said, putting her hand on my arm like I was about to collapse. "I heard you're still doing that MBA thing. How ambitious." She tilted her head like a confused golden retriever. "Don't take this the wrong way, but isn't it kind of unprofessional? We need people fully committed to Summit Financial, not chasing side projects during work hours." That last part hit like a slap. The conversation around us went quiet. Someone actually stopped mid-chew on their shrimp. Then came the laughter. That polite, nervous chuckling people do when they know something's mean but want to stay in good graces. I didn't say a word, just smiled, nodded, and took another sip of my soda. Let them laugh, let her win the room. I'd already hit my expiration date in their minds anyway. The real kicker? That comment wasn't random, it was planned. Because 4 hours later, still in my suit from the party, I got called into HR. The HR director had the energy of a meditation app and the vocabulary of a malfunctioning chatbot. We've observed some growing misalignment, Mike. Cultural divergence, she said, like she was diagnosing a rash. You've been so heads down lately. It's like you're not really present with the team. I could have laughed. Not present? I was the only reason half our filings hadn't been shredded by regulators. You're obviously very competent, she added quickly. But sometimes competence doesn't translate to cultural fit. I asked one question. Who's replacing me as Chief Compliance Officer? She blinked. Oh, well, legal will absorb your responsibilities. Madison is really passionate about regulatory frameworks. That woman thought a whistleblower was a referee position. That's when I knew I wasn't signing anything. I walked out of HR that night knowing something they didn't. You can't just hand off Chief Compliance Officer duties like passing around office birthday cards. You have to file it, register it, notify the federal government. Until you do, the last person on record is the one they hold responsible. That was still me. The next morning, I came in like any other Tuesday. No drama, no cardboard box, just me in my navy suit, ready for what I knew would be my last day. The office was buzzing with typical corporate delusions. Someone celebrating a synergy breakthrough in the break room, Dylan shouting across the floor about some leadership podcast he'd discovered. Nobody noticed I was walking into my own going-away party. I'd already backed up everything personal from my laptop the night before. A folder of tax documents, a photo of my German Shepherd, a draft of my MBA capstone titled Regulatory Gaps in Digital Asset Management. Funny how prophetic that would turn out to be. I went straight to my office, shut the door, powered on the machine one last time. The system took forever to boot. It always did on Tuesdays. Some overnight update that usually broke 3 things to fix 1. I had work to do before they figured out what was coming. I opened my email, hundreds of unread messages, half urgent, most pointless. Several from legal, still trying to get clarification on my flag concerns about cryptocurrency investment thresholds. Something I'd warned them about 2 months ago that nobody wanted to hear because it might complicate their new digital asset strategy. I deleted them all, every single thread, every warning I'd sent, every cover-my-ass email that showed I'd done my job. Gone. Then I drafted one final email, clean, precise, unemotional. Subject, departure notice, immediate, to legal, HR, CEO, compliance team. Dear all, this message serves as formal notice of my immediate resignation from the position of Chief Compliance Officer. My access credentials have been relinquished and all materials have been returned to company custody. Please ensure Form ADV is updated accordingly to reflect this change with the SEC within the required 30-day period. Wishing you continued success. Best, Michael Richardson. I read it twice. No drama, no bitterness, just surgical language. The way compliance is supposed to sound. Cold, clear, final. That little mention of Form ADV was my insurance policy. If they were smart, they'd catch it. If they weren't, well, that was their problem now. I hit send, stood up, grabbed my badge from the desk. The metal was warm from morning sunlight streaming through the blinds. I walked it to reception, placed it on the counter, handed my laptop to Ashley, the receptionist. Sweet kid, recent Northwestern grad, who actually understood what compliance meant. You're leaving for the day? She asked, looking confused. No, I said, I'm leaving. Ashley blinked. Like, leaving. I smiled. Exactly. And then I walked out. No speeches, no awkward staff gathering, just the sound of my dress shoes on polished concrete and the knowledge that every step away was one closer to fresh air. What nobody in that building understood was that my Form ADV reference wasn't just a courtesy reminder. It was a 30-day countdown timer. If they knew what they were doing, they'd panic, call their lawyers, get on the phone with the SEC immediately. But I knew them. I knew their priorities. If it didn't show up on a dashboard or explode in Slack, it didn't exist. They wouldn't read the email carefully. Or worse, they'd read it and not understand it. That's the real danger of arrogance. It doesn't just make you blind. It makes you comfortable being blind. I walked 3 blocks to a diner, ordered black coffee and eggs over medium, opened my MBA notebook. That morning's topic: strategic failure as leadership dysfunction. I underlined it twice and started taking notes. The morning after I walked out, my phone buzzed at 6:47 a.m. Not a call, a screenshot from Ashley, still stuck inside the glass prison. A Slack thread so tone-deaf, I could practically smell Dylan's cologne through the screen. Dylan, Mike's out. Let's have Madison handle compliance for now. She's already running innovation. How hard can it be? Ashley, don't we need to file something official with the SEC, like Form ADV amendments? Dylan, we'll circle back. Let's focus on team morale. No need to spook people. I stared at that thread for a long time, coffee getting cold. The word morale in that kid's mouth was like glitter on a coffin. Madison, the self-proclaimed regulatory visionary who once said compliance is just fear-based thinking, was now covering federal oversight like it was weekend babysitting duty. For about 10 seconds, something twisted in my chest. Old reflexes trying to make me intervene, warn someone, care. I'd spent 20 years patching holes in their boat while they danced on deck, handing each other participation trophies. But companies don't love you back. They send HR to break up with you, then replace you with someone who thinks synergy is a compliance strategy. They'd always treated regulatory requirements like annoying seatbelt alarms, something you ignore until the car crashes. Now, they'd given the keys to someone who didn't even have a license. I opened my laptop, not theirs, and started working on my capstone in earnest. The title was crystal clear now. The Illusion of Oversight: How Executive Negligence Creates Institutional Risk. Meanwhile, inside that glass monument to bad decisions, things were unraveling fast. Legal tried to schedule meetings with Madison about upcoming SEC reporting obligations. She declined, said she was swamped redesigning our client onboarding experience. Ashley, God bless that kid's underpaid soul, kept pushing. She flagged that without a properly registered chief compliance officer on file, Summit could be in breach of SEC Rule 206-7. Patricia's response came back within minutes. I don't have time for hypotheticals. There it was. The magic trick executives pull on themselves. Treat every warning like a mood killer until it becomes a subpoena. Ashley tried one more time, this time with a detailed email. Here's what we're filing under Mike's name. Here's what hasn't been updated. Here's the actual regulation, highlighted in yellow. She got pulled off the compliance thread within an hour and reassigned to client experience optimization. You can't make this stuff up. Madison sent a company-wide email that afternoon. Subject: Compliance is a mindset, with some quote about being your most regulated self. She attached a photo of a cat wearing glasses with the caption, "This could be you if you follow the vibes." That email ended up on LinkedIn. People actually clapped in the comments. Ashley messaged me on my personal email, hesitant, probably worried I'd report her. I know you're not here anymore, but I wanted to say you were right about everything. They're not listening. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally realized it wasn't my mess to clean up anymore. There was a time I would have marched back in there, files in hand, ready to save the ship. But ships captained by clowns deserve the iceberg. I didn't need revenge, I just needed distance. But karma had already packed its briefcase and started making calls. It hit my inbox around 2:17 p.m. on a Thursday, tucked between LinkedIn spam about digital transformation partnerships and an alumni newsletter I never read. At first, I almost deleted it. The sender looked familiar, but vague. James Morrison, Associate Examiner, SEC Chicago Division. We'd crossed paths at some compliance roundtable last year. Former Marine, serious guy, asked good questions about cryptocurrency oversight. Now he was in my inbox. Hey Mike, heads up. We're dropping by Summit Financial tomorrow morning for a routine examination. Random selection, nothing major. Hope you're well. Semper Fi. I stared at it, read it again. Let the words sink in. Random examination. Tomorrow morning. I smiled, not a smirk, not a laugh. The kind of smile you give when your opponent forgets your rook has been sitting behind their king the whole game. I typed back, "Hi Jim, appreciate the heads up. I'm no longer with Summit as of last week, resigned Tuesday. Please coordinate directly with their legal department. All the best, Mike." Ura, no emojis, no exclamation points. Just the clean blade of professional detachment. Then I opened a new email to my attorney, Subject: FYI, SEC contact. Body: heads up. Looks like they're walking into a storm. No registered CCO on file. No transition documentation. Timing couldn't be better. Let me know if we need to get ahead of anything. I've got records of everything. I hit send and closed my laptop. Sat there listening to the hum of my refrigerator, occasional car doors slamming in the parking lot. A breeze came through the window and shuffled my MBA notes like they were waiting their turn to matter. That night, I slept better than I had in months. At exactly 9 a.m. the next morning, James Morrison walked into Summit Financial's lobby. Navy suit, government posture, clipboard in hand, face calm in that uniquely terrifying federal way. He introduced himself to Ashley, asked to speak with the chief compliance officer, handed over his card like it was just another Tuesday. Ashley, bless her innocence, smiled and said, "Mike's not in today." Jim raised an eyebrow. "Michael Richardson? He's still your registered CCO?" "Yes, but I think he's on vacation or something." Jim didn't frown, didn't blink, just made a note on his clipboard. "Then I'll wait." 10 minutes later, legal got word. A paralegal came running into the general counsel's office, breathless, whispering about an unannounced SEC examination, asking for Mike specifically. Within 60 seconds, 3 lawyers were flipping through binders like it was 1995. Patricia got yanked out of her morning latte meeting. She walked into the conference room, where Jim was now seated, calmly reviewing some brochure someone had mistakenly given him about innovation through collaboration. Our summit promise. He looked up, polite as ever. "Morning. We're conducting a routine examination. Shouldn't take long. I just need to review recent filings with your chief compliance officer." Patricia blinked twice. "Mike no longer works here." Jim made another note. "I see. Then who's been designated as CCO on your Form ADV since his departure?" The silence was deafening. Someone from HR muttered something about transition planning. A junior associate fumbled with his laptop, trying to locate any official documentation. Madison, still blissfully unaware in some coffee shop across town, had posted an Instagram story 20 minutes earlier. When you choose innovation, regulations adapt. Disrupt compliance. Jim folded his hands. Just to confirm, since Michael Richardson is still the registered CCO on file, any submissions made after his resignation would require immediate amendment. Depending on the nature of those filings, we might be looking at potential violations of Section 206 of the Investment Advisors Act. Patricia tried her PR smile. "I'm sure this is just administrative oversight. We have a very robust culture here." Jim cut her off without raising his voice. "Culture isn't compliance, Ms. Sullivan. That's when legal started sweating real sweat. Not the glossy discomfort of bad press or investor complaints, but that gut-cold realization that something had gone fundamentally wrong and there was no cheerful Slack channel to spin it away. Someone finally pulled up the SEC database. Sure enough, Chief Compliance Officer Michael Richardson, status active, last Form ADV update 5 days ago, including revised cryptocurrency investment thresholds and updated AUM figures. Filed under my login credentials, after my resignation email, after my badge was returned. The room froze because, legally speaking, that was a false filing. Jim didn't yell, didn't pound the table, just leaned back in his chair like he'd seen this movie before. "I'll need to open a formal inquiry." Patricia's hand shook. Reaching for her water bottle, Dylan burst into the room, probably summoned from whatever podcast he'd been listening to. "What's the situation? Can we get you anything? Coffee? Pastries?" Jim looked at him like he was a child who'd wandered into surgery. "Are you the current chief compliance officer?" "Well, no, but I'm head of strategic operations, and Madison handles our regulatory culture." "Where's Madison?" Silence. "She's remote today." Jim made another note. "I'll need to speak with whoever's been handling compliance responsibilities since Mr. Richardson's departure." More silence. That's when Ashley, God bless her, spoke up from the doorway. "Nobody has. They just kept filing under Mike's name." The temperature in that room dropped 10 degrees. Out in the world, I was making breakfast, scrambling eggs, listening to NPR. My German shepherd was barking at a squirrel outside. I had jazz playing in the background and my notebook open on the kitchen table. I flipped to a fresh page and wrote, Chapter 5, The Consequences. Underneath, I jotted the first line. Never let someone else sign your name, especially after you've already left the building. I took a bite of toast and smiled. In that conference room, they were just starting to understand the mess they had made, but they had a long way to fall. The headline came through around 1:23 p.m., just as I was reviewing notes from my portfolio management class. A notification from Financial Planning magazine. SEC opens inquiry into Summit Financial over. CCO filing irregularities. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I just leaned back, took a slow sip of coffee, and clicked the article. The write-up was short and brutal. Classic financial press. Dry tone. Lethal implications. The Securities and Exchange Commission has opened a preliminary inquiry into Summit Financial Advisors after discovering regulatory filings listing former executive Michael Richardson as Chief Compliance Officer days after his resignation. The filings include quarterly asset adjustments and cryptocurrency investment disclosures now under review for potential misrepresentation. That word misrepresentation was doing serious damage, and it hadn't even hit Bloomberg yet. My phone buzzed constantly for the next hour. Missed calls, texts, screenshots. 2 different reporters sliding into my LinkedIn DMs with messages like, Hi Michael, would you be willing to comment on the recent SEC activity at your former firm? One even added a little fire emoji. Classy. I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I copied the headline and pasted it into the top of my capstone draft. I'd been workshopping the opening for weeks, trying to make it feel grounded and relevant. Now it started with, in 2025, a mid-sized financial firm became a case study in executive liability, not because of whistleblower leaks or malicious fraud, but because they failed to understand what a chief compliance officer actually does. It was perfect, really, because just last semester, I'd submitted a preliminary paper on regulatory chain of custody in wealth management firms. My professor had written in the margin, interesting hypotheticals, but highly unlikely in the real world. I was tempted to forward him the article with a smiley face. Back at Summit, I could only imagine the chaos. Someone in legal had surely started digging through archived emails, panicking over every message that used the phrase on Mike's behalf. Investor relations must have been fielding calls like a 911 dispatcher, every client with serious money wanting to know if their last report had been signed by a ghost. The stock dropped 11% in 3 hours. By end of week, it was down 18%. That Friday, an internal memo leaked announcing that Madison Sullivan had transitioned to external consulting opportunities. No goodbye party, no wine emoji-filled farewell post, just gone. Patricia issued a statement about organizational restructuring to better align with regulatory expectations. Dylan lasted 2 more weeks before getting demoted to junior analyst, probably spending his days updating Excel sheets instead of pontificating about leadership podcasts. Meanwhile, I was sitting in a quiet seminar room at Northwestern, discussing the final formatting of my capstone with my MBA advisor. He read the new title aloud, Collapse by Design, A Study in Executive Negligence and the Power of Walking Away. He looked up and asked, Was this inspired by current events? I just smiled. You could say that. That evening, I gave a guest lecture to a room of Executive MBA candidates. Half of them had day jobs at firms just like Summit, places held together with jargon and wishful thinking. During the Q&A, one student asked, So what's the main takeaway? I said, Never be the only thing holding up the roof, and if you are, document everything before you step away. The truth has a way of surfacing when people stop covering for incompetence. Afterward, I walked to my car in the crisp autumn evening. My phone was quiet. My lawyer hadn't called in days. For once, the world wasn't on fire behind me. 6 months later, Summit Financial paid an $850,000 settlement to the SEC and admitted no wrongdoing, which in regulatory language means they admitted everything while trying to save face. Patricia stepped down as CEO to pursue other interests. The company's AUM dropped by $400 million as clients fled to more stable firms. Me? I opened Richardson Compliance Consulting, specializing in cryptocurrency regulations and military contractor oversight. Turns out, 20 years of experience, an executive MBA from Northwestern, And a reputation for not backing down from executives opens a lot of doors when you're not carrying someone else's baggage. I also started teaching as an adjunct professor, turning the Summit case study into required reading for compliance courses across the Midwest. Students loved it. Real-world consequences, real numbers, real people making real mistakes. During one class, a student asked, "Do you ever regret not warning them one more time?" I thought about it for a moment. You know, there's a difference between helping someone and enabling them. I spent 20 years being their safety net. When they decided I wasn't worth keeping around, they lost the right to my protection. Sometimes the best thing you can do is step back and let gravity do its job. I started the engine of my new truck, turned on some classic rock, and drove home to feed my dog. The autumn air was crisp through the open windows, and I had dinner plans with a fellow veteran who'd reached out about consulting work with his firm. Justice didn't come from dramatic confrontations or angry emails. It came from documentation, patience, and the quiet satisfaction of watching arrogance meet its match in federal regulation. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just stepping out of the way and letting people face the consequences of their own choices. And next semester, every compliance student in Chicago will know exactly how that works.